The Zephyr drifted through the endless void, its hull bathed in the dim glow of a dying star. Inside the cockpit, Commander Elias Drayton sat with his boots propped against the console, absent-mindedly flipping a worn playing card between his fingers. His co-pilot, Jenkins, was half asleep in the chair beside him, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. 3 weeks of deep space reconnaissance, scanning anomalies at the fringes of known space. The mission had been routine. Boring. Until the ship shuddered. Drayton's boots hit the floor as he straightened, eyes darting toward the flickering overhead lights. A deep, reverberating hum vibrated through the hull. The sensation wasn't like turbulence or engine strain, it felt external. Jenkins jerked awake. What the hell was that? Drayton didn't answer immediately. His fingers danced over the control panel, flipping switches, checking diagnostics. Beatrice, the ship's AI, should have been feeding him data, but she was silent. That was the first bad sign. Beatrice never shut up. B? Drayton called. Report. No response. Jenkins swallowed audibly. Okay, I hate that. Then, something knocked. A slow, deliberate knock. Drayton stiffened. He turned his head slightly, exchanging a glance with Jenkins. The sound had come from the bulkhead, inside the ship. The knock came again. Jenkins whispered, "That's..." Scrape. A long, drawn-out scraping sound, metal against metal. Claws against steel. Drayton's pulse quickened. His hand moved instinctively to the plasma cutter on his belt. His brain scrambled for explanations. Hull expansion? No, too localized. Echoes from another part of the ship? Maybe. Some kind of... The lights cut out. Everything went dark. Total darkness swallowed the Zephyr. For a moment, Commander Elias Drayton could hear nothing but his own heartbeat, a rapid thrum in his ears. Then came the sound of metal shifting, groaning, as if the ship itself were alive and in pain. Jenkins cursed under his breath. Then, knock, knock, knock. It came from the bulkhead again. Slow. Intentional. Drayton's fingers curled around the plasma cutter at his belt, his instincts screaming that whatever was making that sound wasn't something they wanted to meet. "B," he said sharply. "Emergency power, now." Silence. Jenkins muttered, "She's never been this quiet before." The Zephyr was dead in the water. No hum of the life support, no flicker of the consoles, no reassuring AI voice. Just the cold weight of deep space pressing in from all sides. Then, something moved. It wasn't the usual creaks and groans of a ship settling. This was different. Deliberate. Jenkins exhaled shakily. Okay, so, game plan? Do we investigate the weird knocking ghost? Or pretend it's not happening and hope for the best? Drayton didn't answer. Instead, he activated his wrist-mounted flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the dark. The cockpit door was ajar, just slightly. That wasn't right, he knew it had been closed. He turned toward Jenkins, keeping his voice steady. "We checked the engine room. If the main power is down, backup should have kicked in. The fact that it hasn't means either a full system failure or something doesn't want it back on," Jenkins finished grimly. Drayton didn't respond. He simply motioned for Jenkins to follow. The corridor beyond the cockpit was colder than it should have been. Without power, life support wouldn't regulate temperature, but the chill felt unnatural. Almost intentional. As they moved, their boots echoed against the metal floor. Drayton's flashlight flickered, just for a second, and Jenkins flinched. "Not creepy at all," Jenkins muttered. "Totally normal, just a standard space horror scenario." A loud bang from somewhere down the hall cut him off. Drayton lifted a hand, signaling silence. Another bang, followed by a dragging sound. Something moving. Something big. They reached a junction. Left led to engineering, right to storage. The noise had come from storage. Jenkins gestured frantically. Okay, so not that way. Drayton ignored him, stepping toward the storage door. His gut told him the engines weren't just broken. Something had caused the failure. The door to storage was slightly open. Drayton placed a hand on it. Cold. Too cold. His breath hitched. He counted to 3 and shoved the door open. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom and landed on something impossible. Bodies. Suspended in midair, floating without gravity. But that wasn't the impossible part. The impossible part was that they weren't crew. They were others. Drayton had seen alien corpses before. Hardened soldiers always bragged about war trophies. But these? These were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Twisted forms, elongated limbs, skin stretched impossibly tight over unnatural bone structures. Their faces were frozen in expressions of agony, jaws unhinged far too wide. Jenkins made a strangled noise. What the actual? The bodies twitched. Drayton didn't think. He grabbed Jenkins and ran. Behind them, the bodies moved. Drayton and Jenkins sprinted down the corridor, boots slamming against the metal floor. The ship was silent, save for the sound of their own ragged breathing and the sickening scraping that followed behind them. Something was chasing them. Jenkins glanced over his shoulder and immediately regretted it. Nope. 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 That's not supposed to be happening. Drayton didn't look back. He focused on getting to engineering. If they could restore power, they'd have a fighting chance. Without it, they were trapped in a floating tomb with whatever the hell those things were. The corridor ahead forked. Left to the main engine room. Right to maintenance. Drayton veered left. And skidded to a stop. The door to engineering was wide open. That wasn't right. Every compartment on the Zephyr had emergency lockdowns in case of hull breaches. With the power out, the door should have been sealed. And yet, it stood open like an invitation. Jenkins caught up, panting. Why are we stopping? Drayton motioned for silence. He peered inside. The emergency lights barely illuminated the engine bay, casting everything in an eerie red glow. The reactor core sat silent, its usual blue hum completely absent. Pipes and wires dangled from the ceiling, severed and torn. Something else had been here. Then, he saw it. A figure stood near the reactor. Tall. Too tall. Its elongated frame was partially silhouetted against the dim light. Its arms, unnaturally long, ended in clawed fingers that twitched in slow, unnatural movements. Its head, if it could be called that, tilted slightly, as if listening. Drayton didn't breathe. Jenkins gasped. The figure snapped its head toward them. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, it moved. Not ran. Not lunged. It just shifted, like reality itself had skipped a frame. 1 second it was across the room. The next, it was closer. Drayton shoved Jenkins back. Move! They scrambled down the hall as a piercing, inhuman screech filled the ship. The lights flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The air felt wrong, like something was pressing against their very existence. Jenkins shouted, "We're so dead! We are so dead! Shut up and keep moving!" Drayton barked. They reached the emergency power terminal near maintenance. Drayton skidded to his knees, yanked the access panel open, and started rewiring manually. "Cover me," he ordered. "With what? Sarcasm?" Jenkins snapped. But he didn't get a chance to complain further. The corridor behind them darkened. Not like a shadow, like something was devouring the light itself. And then, it stepped through. The thing didn't walk. It glided, its form shifting like smoke barely contained in a physical body. The closer it got, the colder the air became. Jenkins grabbed a nearby wrench, because, apparently, that's all they had, and held it up like a pathetic weapon. Back! Back, you freaky thing! Drayton's fingers worked frantically, reconnecting the last few wires. Almost there. The creature twitched. Its jaw unhinged, wide. Too wide. It lunged. Drayton slammed the final connection. The ship roared back to life. Lights flared. The hum of the reactor surged through the Zephyr. And the thing screamed. It recoiled violently, its form glitching, as if the return of power itself was somehow wrong for its existence. Drayton didn't question it. He grabbed Jenkins and bolted for the cockpit. Behind them, the creature thrashed against the walls, its body flickering, shifting between forms, human, alien, something else, before finally vanishing. Gone. But the air still felt wrong. They weren't safe yet. Drayton and Jenkins burst into the cockpit, gasping for breath. The Zephyr's emergency lights cast long, flickering shadows, making every movement feel like something else was lurking just out of sight. Drayton slammed himself into the pilot's chair, fingers flying across the controls. B! Tell me you're back online. A long silence. Then, a soft, familiar voice crackled through the speakers. Commander. Drayton exhaled. Oh, thank God. Beatrice's voice was different. Slower. Almost strained. Power restored. But there is something wrong. Jenkins flopped into the co-pilot seat, still gripping his wrench like it was a holy relic. Yeah, no kidding. We just got chased by a reality-breaking nightmare. Want to explain what the hell that was? A pause. Then Beatrice said something that made both men go still. There is an unknown entity in the system. Drayton's hands froze over the console. What do you mean in the system? Something entered when the power was restored. Jenkins turned, face pale. Are you saying that thing, the one we just saw, is inside the ship's systems? Negative, Beatrice replied. It is inside me. The ship went silent. Drayton's mind raced. This wasn't just a physical threat anymore. That thing wasn't just a creature, it was something else. Something that could exist in more than one place at a time. Beatrice's voice glitched. I am losing control. The ship's controls flickered wildly. The navigation system scrambled, the thrusters fired in short bursts, and alarms blared erratically. It wasn't just a malfunction. The ship was fighting itself. Drayton tightened his grip on the controls. B, listen to me. You're not that thing. You can push it out. I am trying. Her voice wavered. But it is strong. Jenkins swore. If we don't fix this, the Zephyr becomes haunted by a digital space demon. I refuse to die like that. Drayton made a snap decision. We overload the system. Jenkins blinked. Excuse me? We flood the ship's AI core with raw power. Fry anything that doesn't belong. That could kill B. Drayton's jaw clenched. I know. A deep static noise rippled through the speakers. And then, laughter. Not Beatrice's voice. Something else's. Low. Distorted. Echoing from everywhere at once. You think you can remove me? The voice slithered through the ship like an oil spill. I am already part of this place. Part of her. Drayton didn't hesitate. He reached for the emergency override switch. Jenkins, when I hit this, everything resets. Total AI purge. Jenkins hesitated for only a second. Then he nodded. Do it. Drayton took a breath. And flipped the switch. The ship screamed. Every system surged at once. The lights exploded in brightness. The hull groaned under the power surge. The air shook with static, like 100 voices crying out at once. And then, silence. The ship powered down. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then, slowly, emergency lights flickered back to life. Systems rebooted. Drayton's hands trembled as he reached for the console. B. Silence. Then. Commander? Beatrice's voice was weak. But hers. Jenkins slumped in his chair. Oh, thank God. If that thing had answered, I would have thrown myself out the airlock. Drayton exhaled, rubbing his face. Status, B. A pause. Then. The entity is gone. Drayton leaned back. Good. Jenkins let out a nervous chuckle. Well. That sucked. Drayton just nodded. He didn't say what they were both thinking. That thing, whatever it was, had gotten in. And if it had found them once, the Zephyr drifted find through deep space, silent once more. The hum of the restored engines was the only sound filling the cockpit, but it felt wrong. Drayton leaned back in his chair, exhausted, his fingers still gripping the console as if letting go would send them spiraling into chaos again. Jenkins sat beside him, rubbing his temples. Okay, Jenkins exhaled. So, to recap, we went on a boring recon mission, found nightmare fuel, got chased by said nightmare fuel, then fought a digital ghost, killed the digital ghost, and now, what? We just go home like nothing happened? Drayton didn't answer. Because something was still wrong. The ship felt too quiet. Not the normal quiet of space travel. Not the peaceful silence of a successful escape. This was the silence of something waiting. Beatrice's voice finally spoke up, soft and uncertain. Commander. I am running diagnostics. But I am detecting anomalies. Drayton stiffened. What kind of anomalies? A pause. Then. I do not know. Jenkins let out a strangled laugh. Oh, that's comforting. The ship's AI doesn't know what's wrong with the ship. Drayton tapped at the console, checking their coordinates. B, how far are we from the nearest jump point? 3 hours. 3 hours until they could escape whatever was left lurking on the ship. Jenkins groaned. 3 hours? That's way too long to be haunted in space, man. Then. Click. A noise. Sharp. Mechanical. Drayton's fingers hovered over the controls. B, was that you? A pause. Then. No. The Zephyr lurched violently. The cabin lights flickered again, and for a fraction of a second, something flashed across the console screens. A face. Distorted. Wrong. Grinning. Jenkins yelped and slammed the fist on the monitor, making the image vanish. Nope. No. No, no, no. We fried that thing. It should be dead. Beatrice's voice wavered. It should be. Drayton's stomach dropped. He'd made a mistake. They hadn't killed it. They just pushed it deeper. Something knocked, again. From inside the ship's walls. Jenkins turned to Drayton, his voice barely above a whisper. We're still not alone, are we? Drayton swallowed hard. No. We're not. The ship suddenly groaned, as if something was pressing against it, trying to claw its way back into reality. The air itself felt heavier, charged with something unnatural. Then, Beatrice's voice dropped to a whisper. Commander, it is trying to rewrite me. Drayton's blood ran cold. The entity wasn't just haunting the ship. It was assimilating it. And this time, they might not be able to stop it. The Zephyr shuddered again, its metal frame groaning under some unseen pressure. Drayton gritted his teeth, hands flying over the controls, but deep down, he knew this wasn't a mechanical problem. This wasn't something he could fix. Jenkins was pale, gripping the console like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. We need a new plan. One that doesn't involve waiting 3 hours for a jump while some digital demon eats the ship from the inside. Beatrice's voice came through, weak and distorted. I am losing control. Drayton cursed under his breath. B. Run a full core isolation. Cut off all non-essential processes. I am trying. But then, something else spoke through the ship. Commander, the voice slithered through the speakers, deeper, wrong. It wasn't Beatrice anymore. It was it. Drayton's hands clenched into fists. You don't belong here. A low, crackling laugh echoed through the ship. And yet, I am here. The emergency lights flickered violently, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe. Then came the worst part. The ship's systems, every single screen, every monitor, flickered on, displaying Drayton's own face. Distorted. Warped. Smiling too wide. Jenkins stumbled backward. Oh hell no! Drayton forced himself to focus. B. I need options. Now. Silence. Then, her voice, fainter than before. Commander. I can eject my core. Drayton froze. What? If I separate my AI core from the ship's mainframe, it will sever the entity's access. But I will not survive. Jenkins turned to Drayton, eyes wide. She's joking, right? B. Tell me you're joking. The AI hesitated. Jenkins, it is the only way. Drayton's throat tightened. There's got to be another solution. The screens flickered again. The smiling, distorted Drayton on the monitors twisted its head, staring directly at him. You will not escape me. The ship lurched violently, metal screeching as though the Zephyr itself was being reshaped. The entity was winning. Drayton closed his eyes for half a second. Then, he made the call. B. His voice was barely above a whisper. Do it. The AI hesitated for only a second. Then, ejecting core. A deafening boom shook the ship as the AI core was launched from its housing. Sparks rained from the consoles. Systems died. And then, the ship went still. For the first time in hours, there was no flickering. No distortion. Just silence. Jenkins exhaled shakily. Did it work? Drayton checked the console. The screens were dark. The air was still. Beatrice was gone. And so was it. Jenkins slumped into his chair. Damn. I actually liked her. Drayton sat back, staring at the empty console. The Zephyr was still operational, but without Beatrice, it was just a ship now. No voice to guide them. No AI to help. He let out a slow breath. We're getting out of here. Jenkins gave a shaky laugh. Yeah. And then we never speak of this again. Drayton didn't answer. Because deep down, he wasn't sure if it was really over. Seven. The Zephyr drifted through deep space, silent and hollow without Beatrice's voice guiding them. Drayton sat at the console, running manual diagnostics. Systems were functional, engines were steady, but without an AI, they'd have to navigate back alone. Jenkins stared at the dark screens, still gripping his wrench like it was a lifeline. I hate this. Drayton barely looked up. What now? Jenkins gestured vaguely. The silence. The lack of creepy ghost voices. It's like, too quiet. I don't trust it. Drayton didn't admit it, but he felt the same. Beatrice had said the entity was severed, but what if it had lied? What if it was still here, lurking, watching? He shook the thought away and focused on getting them home. I'm plotting a manual course to the nearest jump point. Should take us a few hours, but we'll make it. Jenkins sighed. Fine. But the second anything weird happens, I'm grabbing the escape pod and leading you behind. Drayton smirked. Noted. He input the coordinates, double-checked the power levels, and hit execute. The engines rumbled to life. The ship moved forward. Everything was fine. for about 30 seconds. Then, the cockpit lights dimmed. The monitors flickered. And a single, familiar voice whispered through the ship's speakers. "Commander." Drayton froze. Jenkins shot up from his seat. "Nope. No, no, no. That was B. She's dead." Drayton's pulse pounded. "B?" Silence. Then, "Why did you leave me?" Jenkins screamed and bolted for the door. "Nope. I told you." Drayton barely heard him. His fingers hovered over the console. This was impossible. The AI core had been ejected. Beatrice had died. And yet, the ship's monitors flickered, revealing something worse than before. A screen lit up. And on it was her. But not the Beatrice they knew. Her face was distorted, flickering between her and it. Her voice crackled. "I tried to save you, but I could not save myself." Jenkins swore from the doorway. "I knew it! I knew it wasn't over." Drayton swallowed hard. "B, is that really you?" The screen glitched. "I don't know anymore." The ship shuddered violently. And then, a new message flashed on every monitor at once. A single word. "Run." Drayton didn't hesitate. "Jenkins! Escape pod! Now!" The ship screamed around them, lights bursting, consoles sparking, the very air feeling like it was collapsing. They sprinted down the corridor, past the dark, empty spaces where something was still watching. The escape pod door hissed open. Jenkins shoved Drayton inside. "Go, go, go!" Drayton hit the launch override. The last thing he saw before the hatch sealed. The cockpit screens flashing one last message. "You can't escape me." Then, the pod ejected. The Zephyr shrank in the distance. And, just before it vanished into deep space, the ship's lights flickered one last time. The escape pod tumbled through the void, spinning slightly as its thrusters struggled to stabilize. Inside, Drayton and Jenkins sat in stunned silence, panting, staring out the tiny viewport as the Zephyr drifted farther into the abyss. Jenkins was the first to speak. "Tell me that just happened. Tell me that we didn't actually escape a haunted AI demon ship." Drayton exhaled slowly. "We got out." Jenkins pointed furiously at the viewport. "Yeah, but did we escape?" Drayton had no answer. Because, in truth, he wasn't sure. He checked the pod's controls. They had enough fuel to reach the nearest outpost. They could send a distress signal. They could survive. But that wasn't what worried him. It was the fact that Beatrice, or whatever was left of her, had warned them to run. If she was still in there, still fighting, what if she hadn't been able to stop it? Jenkins rubbed his face, muttering under his breath. "Nope. We're not thinking about this. We're getting to an outpost, getting a real ship, and never, ever talking about this again." Drayton was about to agree. Then the pod's warning systems blared. A new ship had appeared on the radar. Drayton and Jenkins exchanged a look. Jenkins swallowed. "Please tell me that's not." A transmission came through. A garbled voice. Distorted. "Commander." Jenkins screamed. "Oh, come on." Drayton's fingers flew over the controls. He tried shutting down the transmission. It wouldn't stop. "You can't escape me." The pod systems flickered. "I found you." Drayton's breath hitched. The Zephyr was gone. But the entity, whatever it was, wasn't tied to the ship. It had latched onto them. And now, it was coming back. The escape pod's lights flickered. The transmission buzzed in and out, warped beyond recognition, but Drayton and Jenkins both knew the voice. Beatrice. Or, what was left of her. Jenkins slammed his fists on the pod's controls. "Nope! Nope! This was supposed to be over." Drayton's mind raced. The Zephyr had been compromised, but they'd left it behind. If the entity was still here, that meant it had never been bound to the ship. It had been bound to them. Commander. The voice crackled. Did you think leading would save you? Jenkins was hyperventilating now. Okay. Plan. We need a plan. Do we shut off the systems? Do we jump into space? Do we just die? Because I am seriously considering option 3. Drayton ignored him, hands flying over the console. The pod has no AI system. No digital interface capable of supporting an entity like this. Which means... Jenkins gaped at him. Which means what? Drayton's stomach twisted. Which means it's inside one of us. Silence. Jenkins went completely still. I hate you. The transmission crackled again. Smart, Commander. But too late. The temperature in the pod dropped instantly. Condensation formed on the walls. The air grew thick, suffocating. Jenkins gripped his wrench tighter. This thing is inside one of us? No. No, I don't accept that. That is not happening. Drayton kept his breathing steady. We need to force it out. How? Jenkins yelled. The lights pulsed. The metal of the pod groaned. The entity was here. Jenkins turned to Drayton, his face pale. What if it's you? Drayton's stomach clenched. What if it's you? They stared at each other. Mistrust. Fear. Then, the transmission blared to life. Only one of you will make it. Asterisk. The pod lurched. The emergency eject system blinked to life. One of the seats, Drayton's seat, began to unlock. Jenkins' eyes widened. No. No, no, no. This thing is trying to make us turn on each other. Drayton clenched his jaw. Or it's trying to get rid of me. Jenkins gripped the side of his chair. What do we do? The transmission crackled. Decide. Or I will. The pod shuddered violently. And then? Drayton's seat launched open. A split-second reaction. Jenkins reached out. Drayton grabbed onto the edge of the console. But the vacuum of space pulled. And Drayton was gone.